Returnal, the new PlayStation 5 exclusive developed by Housemarque, is a powerful game. Never before have I played a game so capable of delivering such incredible highs, while at the same time the most devastating of lows. It is a game that constantly pushes you to your limits, elevating you to new heights as you're teased with the sweet prospect of success, only to ruthlessly bring you crashing back down when one wrong move rips the illusion of progress away from you. It is a game that encourages us to challenge ourselves and to grow, but also risks having us question what is even the point in doing so. Fresh off the heels of games like Hades and Dark Souls, Returnal is a game designed around its intense challenge. You play as Celine, an astronaut that crash lands on a strange planet who is forced to explore and survive if she has any hope of finding a way home. The catch is that anytime Celine dies, she is thrown back to the moment of when she first crash lands, and for the player, the beginning of the game. Returnal is a roguelike game, meaning that every time you die, you are essentially brought back to square one. No checkpoints, no leveling up, and with the exception of a few minor resources and abilities, you are no more equipped to handle the dangers of the world in the ntth attempt than you were on the first go-around. Your knowledge of how to navigate those dangers, though, that is yours to keep. In Returnal, the world is procedurally generated, meaning that although you will see the same rooms pop up in each playthrough, the items, weapons, and enemies inside those rooms, as well as the order that those rooms reveal themselves, are randomized each time. This means that essentially the only thing that might cause you to do better in one playthrough versus another are the skills that you develop as you organically uncover better strategies for taking on enemies. This means that your progression in the game is directly tied to your growth and learning, and better yet, the drive to continue playing is almost entirely intrinsically motivated. There are no levels to climb, no XP to grind. The reason to continue playing is because you want to, because you can. Because if you work at something, if you try over and over and over again, you will find that you are capable and can succeed. At its best, Returnal, a game where success is inherently tied to our past failures, is uplifting and invigorating. It's not only technical skills that make you a better player in Returnal, though. Your knowledge of how the world works also develops with each new playthrough to make you wiser. Every step you take in Returnal is like a little trip to Vegas. From the colorful particle-heavy fights that you engage in, to the bursts of shiny gold trinkets that explode out of enemies upon defeat, lighting up your dopamine reward pathway. But the most significant aspect that the game borrows from the city that never sleeps is the constant weighing of risk and reward. This gambling-like system is repeated everywhere in Returnal, from the items you choose to equip to the path you choose to navigate. The best example of how Returnal makes use of risk and reward is in its use of parasites. Parasites are small pickups that you can find in the world that come with various perks, like an increase in weapon damage or a reduced reload time, but also come with a negative effect, like a reduction in health repair efficiency. Throughout the world, you may also find malignant items. Malignant items work similarly to other items, but on pickup, there is a chance that you may acquire a suit malfunction that will limit you in some way. Some parasites may even make the risk for malignancy higher. Ether, a resource that is unique for the game in that it carries over into future playthroughs, needs to be spent very strategically. You can spend it in your current run, or let it accumulate so that you can buy bigger and better things in a future run. Every single decision you make in Returnal has some type of risk to it. Do you follow your objective, or do you just go quickly explore that side door right over there that may lead to some better loot? God forbid the door suddenly locks behind you and a wave of enemies and a boss are spawned, wiping you out altogether, or leaving you so damaged that your continued survival is that much less likely. Fine-tuning your preferred balance of risk and reward is an extremely gratifying experience that will make your style of play different from anyone else's, as everyone has a different tolerance for risk. It is really fascinating to see a video game take on this concept and so artfully integrate it into just about every aspect of gameplay. In fact, if you pay attention to your choices, you'll probably end up walking away from the game with a greater understanding of your own risk tolerance and how it may influence your own real-life decisions. Of course, Returnal's biggest risk is that you may dedicate a significant amount of time and energy powering up your character, finding the best gear and weapons, only to stumble on too big of a challenge and lose all of your progress. Much like the risk-reward decisions in the game, there was a risk-reward decision in this design, because having basically nothing to show after sinking hours into a single run sometimes left me feeling really empty, making me wonder, what's the point of it all anyway? Unlike other roguelikes, runs in Returnal are long, really long. It's not unusual for a run to last around 2 hours, and with no way to save the game or even switch to another game as the PS5 Quick Resume feature is not yet available, you are essentially held captive to playing. You can always put your PS5 in rest mode, but there is even risk in that, as you basically just have to hope that nothing funky happens that resets your game, like a firmware update or game update or brief power cycle in your house. Just the other night, I ended up playing for way longer than I anticipated just because I didn't want to lose my progress. I ended up pushing all the way towards the last biome, but eventually I really had to go to bed, so I turned it off and hoped that rest mode would have mercy on my save. And when I do sit down to play again, if I have any outcome short of beating the game, what was it all for? This is the vicious cycle of Returnal. There is great potential for feelings of intrinsic reward for those who can sink the time into it, but what is the risk in doing so? The frustration that I sometimes find on a death, the feelings of worthlessness it can bring up, the stress and anxiety of not knowing if all of my progress will be saved when I boot my PS5 back up from rest mode, those aren't feelings that I want as a part of my gaming experience. This comes down to something way more important than even just user experience. It comes down to accessibility. Returnal is not an accessible game. I'm not talking about actual accessibility features, which are so important to include, and I was happy to see Returnal does indeed include a vast amount of accessibility features. I'm talking about just general game accessibility for the average gamer. The decision to prioritize difficulty and roguelike elements over usability hurts the overall experience. It feels as if the developers did not design the game for me, someone with a day job, content creation channel, and 2 young kids. I'm lucky if I even get 1 hour a couple nights a week to play video games, and that type of lifestyle is just not compatible with Returnal. Housemarque simply had to have had included a save button to account for the many people who have other responsibilities that bleed into their gaming time. And if they are worried about preserving the difficulty and the original vision for the game, they could have included a single life mode like Last of Us or Last of Us 2's Grounded mode for the hardcore players who have the time and want the extra challenge. I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but it's kind of the only solution, certainly the only one that's fair. After all, this game is full of impact. Why gatekeep it for only a certain type of gamer? While poor usability hurts the overall game experience, when you are actually playing the game, things feel good. This is due to a couple key design decisions that all work together to beautifully activate a flow state within the player during a given run. A flow state is best described as a feeling of being in the zone, so much so that you are even unaware of time passing. It's a state that is common to those with a mastercraft, like athletes or even surgeons operating in the OR, and it's actually known to be very positive and beneficial for mental health. Video games, as it turns out, with their artful balance of difficulty and mastery, are a prime ecosystem for promoting flow. Returnal is no different, and the sheer immersion that you feel while playing slips you into a flow state with ease. One of the ways that Returnal immerses in ways that I didn't expect was by its innovative use of the PS5's DualSense controller. The controller's dynamic vibrations allow you to feel the environment around you, down to every last raindrop. Unique vibrations and controller sounds also alert you of when different abilities are ready to use, and the dynamic triggers give you new ways to interact with the game. Essential to the flow experience is unwavering concentration, and Returnal maximizes this by rewarding the player for every second spent concentrating. In Returnal, racking up kills without taking damage awards you adrenaline that further boosts your abilities and skills. Working to not get hit in Returnal requires deep concentration, but it all works to make that feeling of being in the zone all the more real and rewarding. I believe it is this feeling of flow that really makes me come back to the game time and time again, even with all of the frustrating general accessibility issues. It just feels that good. I cannot talk about Returnal without mentioning the allegories to mental health. In many ways, Celine plays like the embodiment of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, an often disabling disorder characterized by intrusive thoughts, nightmares, and flashbacks of past traumatic events. Victims of trauma who suffer from PTSD are forced to relive their past over and over again. In the literal sense, the comparison to Celine, who is forced to relive her traumatic crash and deaths over and over again, is obvious. But Celine is also forced to relive some other past memories from her time on Earth, which take place inside her hometown house that mysteriously appears and is unlocked in some runs in Returnal. While it may not seem this way to Celine, who clearly is plagued by the memories that come to life inside her house, it does not seem like anything inside the house can actually hurt Celine. In fact, it is quite possible that they could actually help her. The cornerstone of psychotherapy treatment for PTSD is exposure therapy, where patients are assisted in confronting their feared memories, with the goal of allowing for proper emotional processing of the event. In many ways, Celine's exploring of past memories gives her a safe environment to explore past traumatic experiences. In fact, you can argue that because Celine cannot die, perhaps her entire predicament makes her safer than ever. Perhaps Celine is not a prisoner to the planet at all. Perhaps she is freer than any of us. Free to experiment, to test, and to grow. Perhaps Celine is not the embodiment of PTSD after all. Perhaps she is the embodiment of exposure therapy, of the opportunity to overcome our fears. Returnal is a meta experience. In so many of the same ways that Celine is challenged and pushed to her limits, the player is pushed right alongside her. The mental health allegories are intriguing, and it is invigorating to find yourself easing into a flow state and surmounting challenges that once felt unsurmountable. Unfortunately, these positive impacts find themselves at odds with the game's inaccessible and frustrating design, making the entire experience uneven at best. My guess is most people won't give up on Returnal because it's too hard. They'll give up because the game simply doesn't fit into their lifestyle. There is a lot of impact to find inside Returnal, but at this point, at a $70 price tag and without a save feature included in the game, consider skipping on Returnal if you don't have multiple chunks of spare time to sink into a game right now. At the very least, taper your expectations of what you want to get out of Returnal. It might not be realistic to expect to get that big W, but the process of working up to it can still be very gratifying. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. If you liked this video, be sure to check out the other Impact reviews on the channel or help yourself to some Returnal impactful gameplay. And remember, for all things games and health, keep it right here at Digital Doc Games.